Please. Thank you so much. I'd like to call the Village of Corrales governing body regular meeting for March 22nd, 2022 to order. Please, let's everybody stand and do the pledge of allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. I'm now going to call roll.
Here.
Councilor Rory, Councilor Burkett,
Here.
Councilor Lucero,
Here.
Councilor Knight,
Here.
Councilor Parker.
Here.
Thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Councilor Burkett and seconded by Mel Knight. Discussion, right? I think since we're in person, we could probably do all in favor, right? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. And raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye or nay.
All right. All right, we're going to move on to reports. The administrator's report, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. The first person I'd like to call on, as usual, is Tanya Latin to give us an update on the COVID.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Administrator Curry. Can everyone hear me okay?
Pretty good.
Okay, good. I'm a little far from my mic. So as we know, our COVID numbers are still holding steady, about 115 to 108 cases per day statewide. Testing is also way down. We're running about 4,900 tests a day, down from, we were doing 10,000 a couple weeks ago. And with more home testing happening, one of the things we have to look at is hospital admissions and percentage of people going to the hospital that are influenza or COVID-like illness. That's still holding right in the metro area at 35 to 31% of people going to the emergency room with flu-like influenza COVID type illness. But our hospital numbers are still staying okay. It's taken a lot more data collection for me to look at where I think we will be. I think we're still good right now. I do know that we've seen Europe spiking over the last 3 weeks with BA.2, the sub variant called Stealth Omicron. They're also looking now to BA.2.2. Still getting data out of that, not a lot of stuff. Even though things are looking good, it's great when I look out to the audience and see some people still wearing masks. Thank you, because it's not over. If you're not boosted, please get your booster, get your third shot. If you're immunocompromised, please get your fourth shot if you're 5 months out from your third shot. We will be doing more shot clinics. We had said we were going to slow down for some maintenance. One of my worries now is FDA meets on the 6th to discuss a fourth shot for everybody to try to protect with waning immunity. And because our shot was made on wild, the original COVID, and we've changed so much in not being as protective. And knowing now, Johns Hopkins study just came out that, we don't want COVID. They're finding a major increase in cardiac related stroke, blood clots, arrhythmias, heart attacks in people who have had COVID, even mild cases. And there are studies now looking at brains and shrinkage and changes in brains, even after mild COVID, happening months after. So we still don't want to get the virus. So with that, we'll probably be going ahead and making another order. We'll go ahead and get our stuff serviced. They've told me they can service it while we have vaccine in there. But the federal government is also running out of money to purchase vaccine, and I want us to have some while we can still get it as well. I'll be happy to sit for questions.
Any questions for Commander Latin from the council? Yes, Councilor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. Tanya, did you say that you are going to start having clinics for fourth shots?
No, some people are already qualified for fourth shots. If they're immune compromised, they automatically qualify. Their third shot was completion of their series. Their booster is the fourth. FDA's advisory committee is meeting on April 6th Pfizer filed for a fourth shot for everyone over 65 based on some data out of Israel. Moderna has filed for use fourth shot for everybody 18 and older. So I don't want to, the FDA and CDC sometimes make these changes very quickly. Sometimes it's very slow. I don't want us to be caught where it's available to get a fourth shot and us not have vaccine available.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Commander Latt? Thank you as always, Tanya.
Thank you.
Mayor, the next item I have on my report is I just would like the counselors to know that the first full week in April, we'll begin our budget hearings with our department heads as we do every year. And Raina and I will be holding them. And the process is going to be like we've done in the past, as we ask the department heads to come make a budget presentation to us that essentially ask for what their needs are for the upcoming fiscal year based upon what they had and spent the last fiscal year. And then we also, if they've got new projects or new programs that they want to have consideration by the governing body for budgeting processes, we ask them to bring them as well. The one other thing that I would ask during the budget hearings, and I know that there are many boards and commissions that we have, and oftentimes they are seeking some sort of funds. The proper way for them to do that is get a hold of their department heads that they're under and ask them or tell them that they're asking for funds, because any funds that go to that the village spends through a commission or for a commission, even if it's a small amount, has to come through that department that it's attached to. And that will give more credibility to the commissions and the commissioners that serve on them. And it will also give the department heads knowledge of what the commission is thinking about as far as there any recommendations or advice that they're trying to provide to the particular department of the village. So I would just ask the commissioners or the commissions that are out there, whether it's the Bosque Commission or whether it's Parks and Rec, we have a number of them, as you're well aware, that they make their wishes or wants known to the department heads. Of course, just like the department heads, just because they make their wants or wishes known doesn't mean they're going to get it, but they certainly need to make what they want known to the particular department head. So we're going to try to wrap them all up in that 1 week, that first full week in April. And usually what the process looks like is that we will have anywhere from a 1 to 2 hour period of time where we meet with the department head and go over the budgets line item by line item that they have. And the other purpose of that is to tell us, the administration, so that we can tell you, the governing body, as best as we can, what each line item represents and what it covers as best as we can.
Mayor, this is Councilor Murray.
Yes, Councilman.
Ron, so maybe a lot of the boards and commissions may not know what department heads to report to. Is that something we can identify?
Yeah, we can. I would hope that they do, but we can certainly identify them.
Yeah, I would
We
think.
can, like, it's easy enough for us to send out an email, Raina and I, to send out an email to the commission saying, if you have a wish or a budget consideration that you want, go tell Lynn Sieverts or go tell Michael Chavez. Not that Michael has a commission over watching him, but oftentimes the stuff that Michael Chavez gets involved with has an impact over the entire village. So, but yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea.
Any other questions?
The next item that I would mention is that Thursday of this week, we're going to have I think kind of a large meeting regarding a presentation that was made to the governing body here a few months ago regarding the proposed library annex. And the reason that we've called this meeting together is pretty simple, is that as I mentioned to the mayor this morning, the cart is way in front of the horse here on this particular project. And I know that they made a presentation to the governing body, but once that presentation was made, there were a lot of other groups that thought they would be affected by it. And those other groups have a lot of input. And also, as far as any planning beyond talking to Marion, the librarian, is that the plans that they started with, the proposed plans that they started with have grown substantially. And the space that they've talked about has grown substantially. And the costs that are involved have not been evaluated at all. So they're, what started out as being an attempt to replace a shed where they're storing books and is infested with all sorts of interesting critters, has grown into a building with many facilities or some facilities. And so space is now a consideration. It has been a consideration from the beginning. Drainage issues are a consideration, and a number of other funding is a consideration. I know that Focal has some money that they've received over the years or gathered up over the years. But as this thing has grown, it's turned into another building. And so we're going to have this meeting on Thursday to kind of get everybody's ideas and try to clarify the process that we need to go through to make this project successful. So, but that meeting is at 2:30 somewhere near the library on Thursday afternoon. Of course, it's an open meeting, and we've asked that all the people that have expressed interest in it, the commissions and the commissioners that are involved, to come on down and we'll talk about it.
Councilor Waldman, did you have a question?
Yes, so this will be an outdoor meeting?
I'm not sure yet, Counselor,
Okay.
depending on the weather, but we thought it would be better to have it over there because
Site, yeah.
there are several questions that people have on the particular site. And I'll just give you an example of one. The proposal, even the original proposal for a smaller building, and now especially this larger proposal that this council had, would require moving the dumpsters that we have into the parking lot, taking up 2 more spaces in the postage stamp parking lot that serves the library. And so there's some problems there. And so these are the things that we need to discuss and not get too far down the road and go, oops, we have to do a redo.
I will say, I don't know how many counselors might wish to attend. You might want to let Melanie know, so in case we have to do a notice of possible quorum.
And then the last item on my agenda is Chief Martinez. He took a stroll through the Bosque yesterday with some Conservancy District members and others, and I just thought it would be interesting for everyone to hear what he discussed. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor, councilors. I had the privilege to do a stroll down the Bosque with Chair Dunning from the Middle River Conservancy Board and Director Barbara Baca, Jason Kasuga, and also Yasmin Nashmi. And they wanted to come down and they wanted to tour the Bosque. They wanted to see our project that we have started as far as our vegetation removal along the toe, to get eyes on it. We had a lot of really good discussion. They didn't get to see my crews at work yesterday, but they got to see what they've already have completed. We started in an area at Dixon and we're working towards Romero. Bird surveys have been completed as discussed, and as part of the plan with no nests found on a daily basis. We go through and double check. I think we had some really good feedback. I kind of let them know my plans for future vegetation removal and continuing. I told them that we got a late start this year. We're not going to be able to complete the full Bosque and the toe removal, vegetation removal, but we're going to keep moving forward. We had really good discussion about dead and down, and trying to come up with a plan and seek funds how we can remove more of the vegetation. I think we all agreed that there's there's, a fire risk, we're just trying to find the balance. So we also did drive all the way to Siphon and toured where they're going to be putting the pumps and the pipes, and they already have some pipe already mobilized out there. So we're happy to see that it looks like they're on schedule to start getting the water flowing. So, any questions?
Any questions from any? Yes, Counselor Knight and then Counselor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, when we talked about this last fall, you had said that there's a timeline. So is that still going to be the stop time? Like, I think it was like April 15th or whatever.
Mayor and Counselor, April 15th to August 15th. That's in essence season. So we got to stop. We can't do any sort of use any sort of chainsaws or mechanized equipment or anything.
Okay, thank you.
I'm hoping to be back before this council come August 16th. And, hopefully have a plan together that we are going to work really hard with Conservancy, the council, and I'm going to continue working with the Carlos Bosque Advisory Commission and continue work, with the Bosque.
Counselor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, but the chief answered my question. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Chief. Does that conclude your report?
Last thing I say, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, the department reports are also included in this packet. Are there any counselor questions regarding any of the department reports? All right, hearing none, we do have an election report from our clerk, Melanie Romero.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. So the Secretary of State's office convened the canvassing board today, and all of our election results from March 1st are now official. They will be mailing certificates of election to all of the newly elected officers here sometime this week. So pretty much everything went smoothly. I got a lot of positive feedback from residents that came in to early vote. We did have the highest voter turnout of any municipality in Sandoval County. So we had 36% voter turnout. Just for reference, Rio Rancho had 12% voter turnout for their election. And the village of, it was Cuba, I think they had 29 people total vote in their election. So we had amazing turnout for our election. Just a couple of things. I did get some feedback that we didn't have enough machines on election day for printing out ballots. So for the next election, we'll just need to budget for an extra laptop and printer to have 3 instead of 2. With this being my first election, I asked for advice from the vendor, and I said, what did we do last time? And they said, you had 2 machines and that seemed to be good. And I said, give me that. And so I think next time, especially for a mayoral election, we definitely need an extra laptop and printer. And my other concern going forward with staying in the March elections is the county is not very happy with us running our own election. Several members of the county commission, as well as the county clerk and the elections manager, all said at the canvassing meeting that it would be easier for them if we would opt into the November election. The mayor of Rio Rancho had some words at that meeting and said that perhaps elections are not supposed to be easy. But my concern is that the county clerk has already said that they will not support the local clerks in the next election. They will give us tabulators and that is it. So this time around, they let us borrow things like the ballot boxes. They let us borrow signs. They answered questions, and they've already said, we are not doing that the next election. If you want help, you need to opt into the November election. So the Secretary of State's office was wonderful, and I don't imagine that they would be allowed to not provide help. And next time around, I'll have at least this election under my belt and a little more experience. But that does concern me that the county staff has already said that they will not support the local elections.
Councilor Burkett?
I have a question, which I think you've already, do they have the ability to not help? It seems like there are certain job descriptions and responsibilities of the county clerk's office, and this is exactly what they have a job to do. And they may have been upset that they had to do their job twice in 1 year instead of just once. But I think that's a reasonable request for us to do it.
Yeah, well, and we did have a memorandum of understanding with the clerk's office. And all of that was specified. So, we can certainly ask for it again the next time around and see what they say. I don't know that we'll have the same team of people in 2 years at the county level that we have now. So I'm hoping that will change for us in 2 years.
Councilor Parker?
Mayor Brook, councilors, Mr. Romero, do you have any idea what voter turnout is during the regular election?
I was looking at that. It looks like statewide is closer to 70%.
But for Corrales?
But yeah, I haven't been able to get numbers for Corrales. I was actually looking for those numbers just this afternoon because I was curious about that too. But I will keep looking for that and see if we can kind of take a look at what we're at a November election. I'd also like to look at, what our numbers are for the primaries and kind of go from there and see, because like I said, we had an amazing voter turnout compared to most municipalities.
Yeah, I think it's great that we led the charge on that. However, it seems like we're leading the charge on a sinking ship. I mean, 36% is pretty pathetic. So I challenge
Right.
everyone here who's listening to go and find a way to get people more involved because, I mean, I don't know.
Better than 12.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it does look like
that's-
statewide, the voter turnout for the municipal election was 13% of the state eligible voters for that.
Councilor Murray and then Councilor. Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, councilors. And not only you indicated that the lines were long and because we only had one voting machine. So is there a possibility that you could deputize a clerk or provide some other mechanism where we can move this into the community center, have more voting machines and allow this not to happen again?
So the main problem is that the election code says that early voting starting on February 1st had to be in the clerk's office. It also had to be in a room that could be locked at night so that it would protect the integrity of the ballots and not be used for anything else. So that really limited what room in the administration complex I could use. They would not let me use the community center, even though it's technically the same complex. It did not count at the state level.
Is it not alarmed or is it not have the same security that our administration building
It's
does?
not technically the clerk's office.
Can we annex it?
That might be something to look
Revenue
at.
producing.
The other thing with that is, in order to do that, we would have to pay a precinct board, which would need to be at least 3 people every day to man that facility for us. So that would be an increased cost.
Well, I seem to remember past elections where we had, volunteers. I mean, did the state change all the rules so that it would make it harder for us?
It is a little harder to, because we did have 2 people that wanted to be volunteers and not be paid for this election. And I did get some pushback from the Secretary of State's office that they want to make sure that we're paying people for their time with the election.
I think this may be where Mr. Miera might come in and maybe we can convince the legislature, maybe they need to change the rules. Thank you.
Councilor Woolman?
Yeah, my question was along similar lines. I'm wondering, with 2 years to go to our next election, would it be possible to craft some kind of, not appeal, but discussion with the Secretary of State's office? It seems pretty archaic that it has to be, in the clerk's office, that you might be able to amend that to some extent. She's been very progressive in a number of different ways. I think the legislature might be open to that as well, unless they want everything to move to the November election.
They're pushing for everybody to move to the November
Yeah.
election, and I think
But I
that's.
think it might be worth
that's part-
exploring that possibility.
Yeah,
So-
and this was the first election with the new rules that were
Right.
voted on in 2019. So this was a change from previous elections in terms of, I think it was a longer time period for early voting. And we did have the option of opening up the community center or a secondary location starting February 12th. But there again, I would still have to have the voting machines at the clerk's office, and it seemed kind of silly to me to have people going across the parking lot and still having people come into the clerk's office. Obviously, it was a lot of learning on my part since it was the first time, but yeah, there's definitely some things I would like to look
Well, you
at.
must have done something right if you got 36% turnout. Then
There were
the
definitely
other question
some
I have
motivated
is,
voters.
did anyone attempt to same day registration?
Yes, we did several same-day registrations, and that was partly what the days that we did have lines on early voting, it was because
That was
we
the
had same-day registrations. And, you know,
It was not an extensive ballot, so I can.
right, yeah. In this case, I did have Raina helping me during the early voting. So she was my deputized clerk for the elections. But yeah, I think in the future, we just need to look at making sure we have extra people.
Thank you.
I mean, just one
Yes,
last comment.
sir.
I mean, I just want to tell you, you did a great job. I mean, getting 36%, I came several times. I came several times trying to early vote, and I waited till the very late end of early voting. But I don't know how you get anything else done, because every time I came there, there was people, and so you were doing a great job of handling
The
it.
last 3 days of early voting, I was just standing back there at the voting booth. So yeah, I didn't get anything else on those days, but it's okay. It's okay. I was able to remote in and do some stuff at home, so it was all good.
Thank you. You really did a terrific job.
Thank you.
And I got a lot of people telling me how pleasant that person was that was helping me. Who was that person? That's our clerk.
Well, thank you.
Very well. The next item is Councilors Forum. This section is for information purposes only, not for discussion and debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session. Yes, Councilor Knight.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Michael Chavez, the new bridge at Loma Larga and Westella looks great, but I don't think it's finished yet. Am I correct? Is Michael Chavez on?
He may not be, even though there it comes.
No, I'm here. No, we still have some paving to do, and then we're gonna do some grouted riprap in front and back. They'll have to wait till spring.
Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I have one more. I just want to thank whoever, if it was MRGCD or if it was our Michael Chavez or the Chief Martinez, that I rode my bike the other day down the first ditch behind some of my constituents and commercial areas. And there were signs there about no motorized vehicles. And those are new signs, and I appreciate those being up there because that was a big concern of some of my constituents who live along that ditch. So thank you.
Yes, Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to thank Councilor Lucero and Parker and you, Mayor. Your terms are expiring, and I hope you enjoy your private life as you return to the private sector, so to speak. Also, I'd like to thank Councilor-elect Mayer and also Brooke, and also Mayor-elect Fahey. Congratulations and welcome to the council. Look forward to working with you on future projects. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on to the Cornullenos Forum. This section is for informational purposes only, not for discussion and debate, to inform the governing body of an issue or concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session. There is a 3-minute time limit. Who do we have tonight?
We have Mr. Kurt Flora,
Come on up.
and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, councilors, Mayor. I'm not here to talk about the illegal letter we got from the village. I'm not here to talk about the letter that the village attorney sent that would have approved our subdivision. I'm not here to talk about what was said in the special meeting where Mrs. Wright asked, is there any more access to this particular subdivision? And again, asked, is there any other access to this particular subdivision? She was asked that. Rory Stout was asked that twice. Her response was, no, there is no other access to this subdivision. After being drilled again further down, yes, my question is there another access to get to this particular property? Rory Stout then changes her answer. Yes, there is, and other roads to get to this property. What I'm here tonight is over 100 signatures on a petition that was turned into the village on September 10, 2018, that was supposed to be in the counselor's packet, that were purposely held out of the packet by Rory Stout. Over 100 signatures here. Counselors never seen these signatures. Why not? They were purposely held from the packet. They were turned in to Rory Stout. We had audio recording on both my phone and on other recordings, giving Rory Stout these petitions, her accepting these petitions and stating they would be in the packet. They were not. So what happened to these? This is what we've been dealing with, the corruption going on by Rory Stout in this village. My next petition is going to be the petition for the resignation of Rory Stout. And I have a lot of backers right now because the corruption has gone too far. The corruption has gone too far. Okay, this is corruption. I tell you, village attorney writes a letter, does not deny our subdivision. The village administrator writes a letter stating the village attorney denied our subdivision. That's where all this began and continues, because things were said, things were hidden from the commission, lied about. Meeting minutes were altered. There's lying in the meeting minutes. We can prove all this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda now. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the village council and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. The item on the consent agenda this evening is approval of minutes for March 8th, 2022, regular council meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilor Waldman, discussion? All right. Because I'm so used to doing it now, I am going to do this by voice vote, if that's all right with everyone. Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray,
Aye.
Councilor Burkett,
Aye.
Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on into new business now. And the first item is consideration, action, and approval of resolution 2213, acceptance and approval of FY 2021 audit. I think I know just who's here to speak on this item. Of course.
Thanks.
Mayor, councilors. What I passed out to everybody to start this presentation is a copy of your fiscal year 2021 audited statements. So I'll just talk a little bit about the report itself, and obviously I think a letter was also routed to you all beforehand.
Would you introduce yourself to us?
Sure.
So we all know who you are.
So my name is Joshua Trujillo. I'm a principal with the SJT group, and we were engaged for the first year to perform the village's audit. So like I mentioned, we are presenting the results of the audit for fiscal year 2021, which ended on June 30th, 2021. So, really our main responsibility as your auditors is to provide an opinion about whether your financial statements are materially correct. So it's a lot of words basically to say that we audit your financial statements, and at the end of it, we provide an opinion about whether we feel the numbers in those financial statements are materially correct. Now, we perform what's called a risk-based audit. What that means is we do a lot of work to identify risks that would affect your financial statements. Once we identify those risks, we design procedures to address those risks. So really, areas of your financial statements that are larger or have a lot more risks get a lot more attention as a result of the audit. Now, as part of the audit, we also audit for the village's compliance with these requirements under the state auditor rule. And then we also obtain an understanding of your internal controls to help us plan our audit. And while we don't give an opinion on your controls, what we do is if we identify any weaknesses in your controls, we will communicate those to you. Now, as a result of our audit, what we did is we issued an unmodified or a clean opinion on the village's financial statements. It's really the highest level of assurance that we can provide as independent auditors. Now, it doesn't mean that there were no findings as a result of the audit. It doesn't mean that there were no adjustments posted as a result of our audit. But what it means is that at the conclusion of our audit, we feel your financial statements are materially correct. Now, we audit the village at several different levels. We audit the village as a whole, as one entity. But then we also audit some of the individual major funds of the village. So for instance, we audit the general fund. We audit the new GO bond that was issued in fiscal year 2020 and spent in 2021 as an individual fund. So we audit the village at an entity level as well as at the individual fund level. And in really all of those levels, we issued an unmodified.
Can I ask just for one clarification, Mayor? Do you audit all of the funds or do you randomly select a certain number of funds and just audit some at random?
No, so what we do is for those funds that are considered major and really those are just quantitatively considered, we audit those individually, and all of the smaller, non-major funds are aggregated and audited together. But yes, at the end of the day, every fund is considered. Now, as part of the audit, and you'll see in this report, which spans almost a little over 80 pages, really at the end of the report is where we communicate any findings that we identify as part of the audit. And there were 4 findings that we communicated as part of the fiscal year 2021 audit. And those began on page 72 of your report. Now, everything before page number 72 is your actual audited financial statements as well as notes that support the financial statements. So the first finding, 2021-001, relates to segregation of duties. It basically means that are there individuals that have access to different parts of the process? And that's something that we look at as part of our internal control understanding. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, there weren't really a lot of individuals available to segregate duties that would normally be segregated. So that was one recommendation we made as part of the audit. And again, more of the details of that are shown on page 72. There was one finding communicated on page 73, which really related to the amount of grants that were shown as receivable, but that were just very old and there wasn't really a lot of history to support that those were ever going to be collected. And as a result of the audit, we actually posted quite a few adjustments to reduce those receivable balances from grants. Because they were, just very old and it didn't seem like those amounts were going to be collected. And because of those adjustments, we also communicated that finding the recommendation on page 73.
Mayor, this is Councilor Murray.
Council Murray.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Trio. Does that mean then if that for some reason you find that old money, that it would flow back into the coffers of the village then?
It would, yeah.
Is there any chance we're going to find any old?
Several of these were many, many years old, and there was no evidence that anything had been done to collect them or really any history to show how they were created. So, when we perform the audit, we look at pretty much every angle to determine, will this ever be collected? Now, there is a chance that it could be if you guys do more research and see that amounts be collected, but from our standpoint, it didn't seem like that was the case. So just
Mayor.
Councilman.
So given that, would it be feasible just to wipe these off the books then and not have to worry about it each audit, successive audit?
And that's ultimately what happened. Is these
That's
were
what they're gone.
adjusted, and you'll see at the end of the notes of the financial statements as well as in the finding itself, we basically communicated that that was done so that they don't kind of continue. And that's really what happened with a lot of these. They kind of carry.
Yep. Right. Thank you.
The other two findings really related to state audit compliance. One of them related to the Public Money Act, basically saying that deposits that come into the village or cashless by the village has to be deposited within 24 hours of receiving that money. I think there were 9 out of the 25 deposits we tested that were deposited after that 24-hour period. And really every instance, it seemed that COVID had an impact on that, with somebody not being available to actually take a deposit to the bank. You know, the act wasn't revised during the pandemic, so ultimately that is something that hasn't occurred in previous years, but did occur in 2021. And then the only other finding related to budget compliance, 2 things that we test for related to the village's budgets, and we do look at every single fund budget. One, did the fund budget enough resources to cover its expenditures? In other words, did it have a balanced budget? And then secondly, did it expend resources in excess of its budget? And that's really what happened with this finding. There were, I think, 3 or 4 funds that had expenditures in the fund that exceeded its budgeted authority. Usually when that happens, a budget adjustment request comes to the council to be approved, and that didn't happen this year. So those 4 funds were reported as being out of compliance with the budget, with the Government Budget Act.
Mayor, this is Councilor Murray again.
Councilor Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. So Mayor, maybe you can answer this question then. So if a department comes up against a budget limitation, is there a mechanism where that department would not spend any money in excess of what they've been budgeted?
I'm going to let our finance person answer that. Raina?
Because it seems like it might take care of this problem if we exceed this type.
Thank you, Mayor Council. I can actually answer what happened there. So at the end of the year, we were trying to clean up our debt service funds. All of that money was budgeted, but it was budgeted in different funds. And even though I knew the audit was coming up, I decided to clean it last year. And so it was budgeted in different funds, but I moved it to get those new funds cleaned up.
So what happened?
It was budgeted somewhere else, and then I went ahead and moved it instead of waiting until July. We just wanted it clean.
I mean, that's fine, but I just wonder, is that something that we need to look at if a department comes up on a budget limit? Does council need to then approve additional funds for them so they don't exceed?
I understand what you're saying. I don't think that's the problem that came up here, though.
Okay.
Actually, I think we're all right. I think our budgeting, I think we've been pretty close in terms of what we need and what's been expended. But in this case, we're just sort of almost we
just decided to make new funds. And
thank you, though. I mean, that's a good point. You never want to leave with that one.
So those,
Thank you.
excuse me. Those were the only 4 findings that we reported as part of the fiscal year 2021 audit. Now, on the other side, we do look at findings that were reported in previous years to see if the corrective actions have been implemented during the year. And in fiscal year 2020, you actually had 7 findings reported, and each of those 7 findings were actually resolved in fiscal year 2021. So these findings that we reported for fiscal year 2021 are all new findings, really everything from 2020. The corrective action have been implemented. All of those findings have been resolved. It is shown in your audit report that those have been resolved. And the expectation, at least from our exit conference and we're talking to Reina, is that these ones are planned to be resolved for fiscal year 2022. And obviously we'll follow up on it again as we start next year's audit. So with that, I don't know if any other questions, but that's really anything that I want to go through related to the audit.
You do have a question, Council Murray?
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple questions. Well, on page, I think it's page 30 of your report, you're talking about the LGIP. And I'm curious that the village is not insured against catastrophic loss of that LGIP fund. Is that correct?
Well, it is invested with the state treasurer, and those amounts are secured against, the LGIP as well as all of the other state treasurer funds are insured against loss.
Did they indicate how they were distributed through the market, or is that just taken as an aggregate amount?
They do, so if you look at the State Investment Council audit as well as the state treasurer's audit, you can see a lot of the disclosure about where those funds are invested and how they are insured with collateral.
Okay, thank you. On page 39 of the report under the municipal general division, you show a para distribution. It looks like it's declining for the years 24 and 25 that you projected out. Is there a reason for that?
So actually what this represents is, so this footnote specifically talks to the para pension plan, and this was a new standard that was implemented 4 or 5 years ago. And what it shows is that the village has a future liability for pensions of its employees. Now, these amounts here, these future, they're not necessarily future payments, but they are is, they're called deferred outflows of resources. You can almost think of them as almost like assets of the village as it relates to the pension plan. And these are just how those deferred outflows of resources are going to be amortized in future years. So that's not really any payout or anything related to that. The actual pension liability of the village, actually in total, is right at about $5.8, $5.9 million. And that's spread across the municipal, general, police, and fire divisions. That's really the liability of the village for future pension payouts under the para plan. But those amounts you're referencing are just the deferred outflows of resources that really relate to future contributions. But those are actually the asset side of it.
Okay. And one last question is on page 68, it shows the schedule of joint powers agreement. I got a little confused on the second line. I think it's the participant. So see if I can find that real quick. So under the joint powers agreement, you talk about the Sandoval County Regional Emergency Communication Center. Then under participants, you talk about the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. I got a little confused. How are those related? And it kind of goes right across there. Again, you under responsible party. It says Emergency Communication Center. Then you get under description, and it seems like it's totally something different. So I'm just curious, what's the relationship there between those two?
Sure. So actually, I think that would be a much better question for maybe like Ron or Raina to answer. Now, the schedule of joint powers agreements is included in the audit, but it's actually one of the portions that is unaudited portion, similar to like if you put a management discussion and analysis in this report. So the joint powers agreements is actually a schedule that is prepared by the village and provided to us to include in here because it is required by the state audit rule. So as far as the participants, the description of the joint powers agreement, that is something that
Is there an answer for, is that just a misprint or?
No. Administrator
Counselor, we do a lot of work with the Energy and Minerals and Natural Resources Department because the state fire marshal is located there. And so we have a relationship with them. And as far as the joint powers agreement with that we're speaking of that was mentioned there, we also have a group of people that meet between Chief Martinez and Chief Vic and regarding the way that some of the duties are handed out within Sandoval County, Rio Rancho, and others. And the mayor of Rio Rancho sits on that. We've had discussions with him about it, but that's the relationship. And a lot of it had to do with the way that things were dispatched and who was responsible for IPRAs and things like that.
And yet it says here, village contribution. We don't know what that is, or?
I don't know specifically what it is, but we can get it.
Okay. I'm
A
just
lot,
curious
a lot of it is time.
Okay, so there's really no salaries or anything like that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation, sir. We appreciate it. I know rain is gearing up for the next one. Sorry. Number 2 on new business is consideration, action, and approval of resolution 2214. This is a resolution directing the publication of a notice of meeting and intent to consider adoption of ordinance 2202. This is an ordinance to repeal and replace chapter 8, article 4, relating to the regulation of signs within the village of Browse, providing for general sign regulations and exemptions from sign ordinance requirements. I don't know if, I think probably the council is well aware that this sign ordinance has been redone in order to become legal in some ways. We had a change in the law. And this is just, so it will be coming up for further action in the next council meeting.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Did we vote on approval of the audit on the last action item?
Yes, we did not. So let's just go back there and do that. Thank you for noticing that last part. I'm all excited about that. All right, so let's back up to item number 1. Thank you very much, Councilor. We need to accept and approve the FY 2021 audit. Do I have a motion to so approve?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And I think
Second.
I got all kinds of seconds. So, all right. Any discussion? All right, thank you. Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray,
Aye.
Councilor Burkett,
Aye.
Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so the second item is regarding the publication of the sign ordinance. Is there any discussion on that item?
Mayor, this is Councilor Murray.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm finding a lot of mistakes in this packet that kind of relate to all these resolutions and ordinances. So under this one on page 134 of our packet, the second whereas statement is incorrect because it reads intends to consider a second reading and final approval of the amended cannabis ordinance. I'm not sure how that worked
We've
in.
definitely been over that one. I don't want that.
Yeah. Also on page 137, page 135 and 137, the ordinance numbers do not match. Page 140 of 205, and this, I think for discussion, there are references to 60-day periods that are discussed throughout the sign ordinance, but there's no indication of when those 60-day periods might start or who's the implementer or enforcement. And I'm a little worried about that. I mean, there's no guidance there, at least who's going to be taking care of those temporary signs for 60-day periods, or when that 60-day grace period, if they pick the sign up and they can't put another sign down for 60 days, who's monitoring those 60-day periods in the ordinance? I mean, it just seems like to me there's a little bit of a lack of oversight on that. And then on page 135 and 152, again, there's conflicting ordinance numbers of between the two, the resolution and I think the ordinances.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any response for the errors? What's going on?
We had numerous back and forth on this. And so I take responsibility. I should have done an extra proofread before we put it in the
Well,
packet.
Mayor,
Yes.
and
Counselor.
to clarify, when we've got a draft like this is the reason that it's in draft, so that we can make it finalized for the final hearing. As you will recall, this was not in any ordinance form when it was last heard by the council. So tonight, this was to get it noticed and published. And so thank you for those corrections. And the issue that I think we need to spend some time with, that I agree with Councilor Murray on, this came through the drafting process from that was in cooperation with Mr. Cog. And I think we do need to look at how you capture when a sign goes up and how long it can be there. Because normally you have that through zoning and planning enforcement office that a permit's issued. But I think we'll look at whether we think that that should be in the ordinance or whether it should be some regulations that are approved by council after the fact.
Well, let me ask you, is the timing of this all right? Should we push this item or is it ready for this stage and then those corrections can be made?
I think it's fine. They're all the corrections are typographical in nature, except for this issue. So I'll talk to Lori Stout about that and we'll get that pegged down as to whether we want to include that language in the ordinance or whether she would propose a resolution with some regulations on how that's going to be implemented.
Yeah, Mayor, just one other comment, because when we allow signs that are permitted to be on private property, it sounds like we have no control over those. And I think the 60-day indicator that's what I'm worried about is, these temporary signs that pop up and you put up on a piece of private property, how are we going to be able to timestamp those and make sure that they get removed within the 60 days, which.
I totally get your question. And the problem, we had those built in previously through permitting of temporary signs. And we just need to see if that's practicable. There are instances when they weren't tracked, for example, real estate signs. They weren't required to come in for a permit. Political signs were in the past, but we just need to decide how we want to implement that.
Okay, I think where we're at then with that understanding, Councilor Burkett.
The example the counselor just brought up, real estate signs, it looks like they're classified as temporary signs, so subject to the 60-day limit, which seems silly if you haven't sold your house in 60 days that you have to take down your sign and then you can't put it back up for another 60 days. So I don't know how we address that and differentiate it from other temporary signs, but that certainly seems like a problem for anyone trying to sell a house, except for in our current market where nobody's sign will be up for 60 days. But in the future, it might.
It's true. In the future, it might. We had that same conversation. Right now, we wouldn't have to worry about it, but it is a concern. You're correct.
Councilor Sarah, did you have a comment? No? Okay, he says no. All right, so with those understandings.
Yeah, just for clarification, a sign could go up for 60 days. Can it then come down for a day and then go up for another 60 days?
Well, what it would be, for example, you're going to be able to have, and that was the contemplation with real estate signs,
right?
That there just be an extension requested if necessary. I think that's real practical. The idea would be is if signs, for example, like a garage sale sign, they won't be up anywhere near the 60-day time period, but that's the maximum limit. And it is related, that was the former limit of political signs, 60 days prior to the election. So that's where that came from.
Is the restriction on political signs removal, is that still a 10-day for removal? Is there anything in here on that?
I'll have to check on that, Counselor. I don't recall seeing that recently when I reviewed it. I'll look at it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think with that understanding, then can I have a motion on this item?
Mayor Roken, Mr. Audio, if should the motion to approve this should we add language that this other stuff's going to happen to it, or what would be appropriate?
I think we approve it for publication, and then I will bring back to you the proposed changes to address these issues, and they can be incorporated as floor amendments. Okay. None of them change the substance of the legislation. It's just simply would be cleanups. And if the council at that time chooses, they can continue the hearing to another date if they're not happy with the changes.
And then just a general question to everyone. Publishing this with the mistakes in it seems like there's a lack of professionality involved, or the corrections would be made. No, how would that work?
what happens with publication is there's a notice published that states what ordinance will be considered.
Not
It
the
isn't a
specific.
verbatim
Got it.
publication.
Okay, then I'm comfortable. I move that we approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Oh,
Can I just,
yes, of course.
if you look at the resolution itself, the notice that's going to be published in the paper doesn't have those errors.
Correct.
That was just in the ordinance.
Perfect. Thank you.
itself. So the ordinance isn't going to be published in the paper, just the notice of
Okay.
the meeting.
Thank you. All right, so I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Counselor Knight. All right, I'm going to take a vote. Counselor Waldman,
Aye.
Counselor Murray,
All right.
Counselor Burkett,
Aye.
Counselor Lucero,
Aye.
Counselor Knight,
Aye.
Counselor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, the next item is consideration, action, and approval of Resolution 2215. This is a resolution directing the publication of a notice of meeting and intent to consider adoption of ordinance 2203, authorizing the issuance and sale of not more than $1,935,000 of general obligation bonds, series 2022A. Sweeney, would you like to speak to the sign?
Sure, Madam Mayor, members of the council, you have before you a resolution authorizing the publication of a notice of intent to consider adoption of the ordinance for the series 2022A GO bonds. These are the bonds that we spoke with you about at the workshop and that were authorized by the voters on March 3rd, 2020. So you'll recall that the steps that we were before you on February the 22nd, I believe, with an application resolution approving the application to the Finance Authority for the sale of these bonds to that body. That has occurred. Interest rate will be set on or about April 4th. And then, of course, following the publication, we'll be back to you on April the 22nd. So 22nd, for consideration of the ordinance and then move to close. We will know the terms and the interest rate on the bond by the time we come back to you for the ordinance on.
Any questions for Ms. Sweeney?
Should have taken notes on the dates.
I know, they're all 20 seconds. I don't get it, but. Any questions?
26th.
26?
I think it's 26th.
We appreciate coordination and work carefully with your clerk to ensure the ordinance and specific terms and conduct there.
Yes, Counselor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. So it looks like to me there are at least two ordinances in this packet. And so what I was finding that item 3 on page 152 of our packet, the ordinance numbers didn't match. Although 52, on page 152, 175, the ordinances were different too, because page 152 lists 22-02 as the ordinance number. So I'm not sure, which of these ordinances are we voting on or?
Madam Mayor, Councilor Rory, yes, I noticed that as well when I printed your packet. So if you look at page 174 of your packet is the notice resolution that is before you this evening. It's resolution number 22-15. Perhaps in reverse order, on page 151 is a copy of the proposed ordinance that will be considered on April 12th for your information only. And then on page 178 is a draft timetable so that you can see all the steps that we're discussing and what we're going to do. And Madam Mayor, Councilor Murray, and Madam Clerk, if it is convenient or appropriate, I'm happy to work offline to give some ideas on how to make the packets perhaps a little easier to follow and correct some of these.
Yeah, I appreciate having the resolution up front first,
Yeah,
and then everything else
absolutely.
follows underneath.
Absolutely. And we have some ideas. We'll work with the clerk, but hopefully give some tips and tricks on getting these together, because they can be cumbersome, and over time you learn little ways to avoid those pitfalls that can happen to us.
So Mayor, I have a question for you and Ron. It looks like under ordinance 2-62, number 8, it looks like we could pass this bond issue by resolution rather than by ordinance. Am I missing something here rather than doing this by ordinance? I mean, I appreciate the sunshine it's going to bring, because there'll be more discussion.
If I might, Councilman Ray, this is constitutional debt. It will be outstanding for more than a year. We're working not with the public markets, but with the finance authority. They will require that more than 1 year is approved by ordinance.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. If there are no more questions, could I have a motion on item 3, please, then?
Mayor, I move that we pass resolution 2215.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor Burkett.
You missed out.
Councilor Lucero, I'm sorry, did I cut another seconder off? I'm
No,
sorry.
I just said that Councilor Oldham missed out on that one.
You did. You did. Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker,
Aye.
Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray.
Aye.
Councilor Burkett.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Item number 4 is consideration, action, and approval of resolution 2216. This is a resolution ratifying the affidavit for notice of public hearing held March 8th, 2022, to approve changes to chapter 18 of the village code governing land use by ordinance 2201, adopted by the council at their regular meeting on March 8th, 2022. Councilor Audio, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mayor. If you'll recall, when we were doing our review of Chapter 18, we had met on Chapter 18 multiple occasions during the year. When it came before us at the second meeting in February, we noticed at that time that final hearing for all counselors in the public would be held on the 8th of March. The ordinance was published by the clerk twice, and therefore exceeding state law requirements. The state law question is 3-21-6, zoning mode of determining regulations, restrictions, and boundaries of district, public hearing required. What it basically says is that you, as a public body, whenever you're looking to amend your zoning ordinance, you need to have a public hearing on it, and you need to publish that notice ahead of time. What we didn't do is we didn't hold a vote like we did tonight on the signed ordinance and the motions to adopt the bond, specifically for the council to approve publication. So in the midst of trying to get everything done that we did in Chapter 18, that step was not done. It has no effect whatsoever for state law and our requirement to publish. However, as Councilor Murray pointed out after the meeting to me, I took a look at it and he was correct. In our ordinances, we specifically call out this rule in 2-63 of our ordinances that there be an approval of council for all publications of ordinances prior to their publication. So he asked me what that means in this instance, and does it affect the act that we took to pass Chapter 18? And in my analysis, what we had done at some point in our history is we had placed rules that govern the conduct of the council into ordinance in 2-62 and 2-63, which are simply your rules to govern your conduct that apply to you. No one else has an ability to enforce rules besides the body itself. You could waive your rules. What complicates it and makes it difficult is they are placed into ordinance. So Councilor Murray asked a good question about what that means. It's further complicated by the fact that in section 18-48 of our code, amendment, that's the specific requirements to amend the zoning code. It states the governing body may amend any part of this article, including the zone district boundaries, following a review and recommendation made by the Planning Commission. So it adds another wrinkle that we have to send these matters to the Planning Commission for review, which we did here. But in other words, it's kind of a redundancy, and those two ordinances are not brought together because we've already sent it to planning and zoning. They've given us a recommendation. And so this thing has been heard and reheard. So the idea, I believe the intent of 2-63 requiring approval by the council is for that instance when the council has never seen a proposed ordinance before. So if the mayor ordered the clerk to publish an ordinance that had never been before you, and suddenly it comes up on the agenda for one hearing with no prior review, that would be a problem. And I think that's what 2-63 was intended to fix. The way that what we have in the agenda as your next item is a proposal for how to correct this technical error, which is to ratify the publication of the clerk. Tonight, the council can vote on that, take a look at it. What it does is it says that the council hereby ratifies the publication of ordinance 18, the notice of hearing on ordinance, the revisions to chapter 18 of the ordinances. So the other option would be to not ratify that, but to come back at the next meeting with the publication of a new ordinance that would repeal what we just did and redo it just so we can give that proper approval, which to me doesn't make much sense because it would be redoing what we did only to correct that procedural issue, which has no legal effect upon the validity of the zoning ordinance. Long statement, happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Murray?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. So I don't totally agree with everything you said tonight, but I'm going to read a statement. And then I also want to point out some things that are in the current affidavit or the resolution that pointed out. I'm going to say this because it pains me to do this, but in the past 2 months, twice Mayor wrote and her administration have circumvented the council authority by posting and publishing 2 proposed ordinance revisions for chapter 18 and chapter 8 on February 13th and 20th for chapter 18 and on March 6th for chapter 8. All these postings were printed in the Albuquerque Journal Sunday edition legal section. All postings were published 2 days before a regularly scheduled council meeting. There were no resolutions on the agenda relating to consideration, action, or approving the posting and publication for these proposed ordinances before and after the printing in the Albuquerque Journal. And I'm not going to read in section 263 as you have stated it as it is. But the first sentence says, notice of proposed ordinance shall be published and only after council approval. Does not say anything about after the fact or before the fact. The second sentence says in the beginning, upon adoption, then all ordinances. Seems clear to me. You must post a notice first only after council approval and then take up the consideration of the proposed ordinance. Councilors, Mayor, we took an oath to uphold the village ordinances, and yet here we are with 2 recent violations. And conveniently appears that there is a fix proposed after the fact to correct the errors. Councilor Burkett's comment that we should approve chapter 18 even if it's wrong is a prophetic statement. 2 wrongs do not make a right either. That is what tonight's agenda will do. If council moves ahead to approve and ratify the Chapter 18 ordinance without due process as stipulated in Section 263. Then council is endorsing further violations by any future administration. Council will also be abdicating any authority by future administrations to post and publish. And that's my opinion. The only way to set the record straight, as Mr. Audio said, is to submit Chapter 18 to publish and post on a future agenda. Then reschedule another meeting for consideration, action, and approval of the proposed ordinance. Now, as he has said, we do not need to do that. That their solution is perfectly legal. I disagree in the strongest terms. No amount of legal maneuvering will correct the actions. I think it's upon us to step back and look at this and reconsider it as a council and do the right thing. So and also I take exception with the affidavit on page 180. The first whereas is incorrect. There was no formal approval of the governing body on the agenda before the March 8th council agenda consideration of the proposed Chapter 18 land use revisions. On page 180, the first and third whereas conflict with each other because there was no formal approval by the governing body and the postings were inappropriate. Also, the first and seventh whereas conflict with each other. Again, no formal approval to post and publish. Therefore, there should have been no consideration on the agenda for the March 8th agenda to propose Chapter 18 land use revisions. Therefore, I think any action to consider approval of this affidavit is inappropriate. The action taken by the council on March 8th approving the proposed Chapter 18 land use revisions may be considered null and void if challenged, and we should reconsider any action taken tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
If we agree to go back, is it going to change anything? I mean, we've already been through Chapter 18 how many times? It seems like it was a procedural thing maybe, but if we can, you know, I know you didn't want that passed. You had some amendments that you wanted added. Do you think that they're going to be added if we wait 2 more weeks?
I would add the amendments in because I wasn't allowed to do it.
That is actually not true. Councilor Paquette?
Yeah, I just have a quick question, just as a courtesy. I don't remember saying that we should pass something, even if it's wrong, but if I could, I mean, and I know.
I thought you did. Somebody said something.
Okay, I don't remember that. I mean, if I did, I would love to get some context on that. And I know that probably won't happen at this particular moment, but but I don't remember saying those words. So
Okay, somebody did because somebody said it was, you know, let's do it if it's
I
wrong.
mean, I think the general thought was. we
Yeah,
should pass
I think I
something to
said
have
that.
A functioning
Right,
Chapter 18.
right.
Councilor Parker? Thank you.
Mayor, councilors, just to come to the rescue of Councilor Burkett, I think I was the person who is being the finger pointed at. But if we'll go back and listen to what I said, is that it's a living document and that it is never finalized. And so if people have issues with it, you can fix something later. Just because it's not in there now does not mean it won't go in there later. And as far as something being wrong, I think that was a very subjective statement.
I agree with that sentiment, though, about it being a living document and
Right.
having something functional is better than having nothing.
Right.
And the something functional we could modify along the way.
Counselor, Mayor, may I make another statement? The only problem I have with that is by doing this, somebody's going to slip in before we get an amendment in place. And that's going to set precedent. And then once you set precedent, then anything is off the table, you know, past that point.
I'm not, I do want to understand your point. I'm not sure that I do understand your point. If they ratify this tonight, if the council ratifies this tonight, then Chapter 18 is in place.
Yes.
And then if the council wishes to take future actions, they may do so at any time. So I don't think anything's going to slip in.
Yes.
Unless we
But Mayor,
delay.
the point is, okay, so in the new Chapter 18, group home is a permissive use in A1 and A2. And from what I understand from reading the P&Z report, you could have somebody come in on A1 and A2 if they've got the sufficient land and if they meet the ED requirements for septic, they could put a group home in there and we wouldn't have any control over it. And that's one of the things I don't like about the way the ordinance is written. I wouldn't allow group homes within A1 and A2 anyway.
Right.
Why is it a permissive use? That's the type of thing that I'm worried about that is going to slip through the cracks is we will not have enough control over some of these things that are in the new chapter 18.
I understand your passion on that point. I know your sincerity on it. I'm not,
Madam Chair, just to clarify, I don't know if my microphone's working. Is this maybe get closer?
yes.
That always scares me because I'm afraid I'm going to like eat it or something. So, Council Murray, the group homes have always been a permissive use. That was not a change. The language was changed to try to better define what was meant by group homes, but the zoning code had always allowed for group homes. Now we're getting off point.
We are.
And Councilor
I
Burkett,
mean, that's my point is I don't think we're here to discuss the merits of chapter 18 right now. We're here to discuss the procedural, how we handle a misstep in that process and whether or not it's important to what
So-
currently exists.
and if I may, Council Murray stated that this it has the risk of being held null and void. I do not believe that is the case because, as I said, the problem here, which I think the new governing body should take on soon, is putting rules into rules and not codify them in an ordinance that makes it appear that it's the law of the village that these things shall be done. They're simply rules of procedure. And the publication, as I said, I think it is important and for the council to be aware of the legislation that is coming forward and weigh in on it, because otherwise it would be a waste of time. If the mayor can simply have the clerk publish something you've never seen, you all may hate it and it's an absolute waste of time. So the reason it's there is to make business function. It's not a sacrosanct act that thereby makes it legal. It's legal once we publish it properly, which this affidavit that the clerk attached was legal publication. It was published on February 13th and heard on March 8th.
Can I make it just one more quick comment? I feel like an error of omission would have been worse than this error. In this particular situation, we published too early. Had we not published, I would have a much bigger problem with it. By what happened here and us not approving the publishing, I mean, it's a slight to us as the 6 members of the village council to some degree, but it's not a slight to the citizens because they still, it was published and they had the chance to review it with the time that they were permitted by law to review it. So I don't love it. I agree that it shouldn't happen again. But I don't think we circumvented the process in any way. If anything, they got 2 extra days of knowing that it was coming.
Well, definitely it was a mistake. It was not meant as a slight to anyone. Would there be a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion that we approve 2216 to ratify.
Thank you. Councilor Burkett, do I have a second? Thank you, Councilor Parker. All right, I'm going to take a voice vote on this. Councilor Waldman,
Aye.
Councilor Murray,
No.
Councilor Burkett,
Aye.
Councilor Lucero,
Aye.
Councilor Knight,
Aye.
Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Well, we have now finished our new business for the evening and it's on to future agenda items. Obviously, coming up under a new mayor and your newly constituted council, there will be some items on for the bond, for the sign ordinance, and I'm sure many other things. There will be an organization meeting, most likely on April 11th with the new mayor. March 31st, well, the new people will be sworn in, 6:30. I think it'll be fun to be there. Before I call for adjournment, I would like to say that it's been an absolute honor to be your mayor for the last 4 years. Thank you. This is my last meeting. Not terribly well attended, but it is it's 8 o'clock. That's not bad. So I want to thank all of you and thank the community. It's been a real honor to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone? You want to stay here more?
I so move.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. It's gonna sit right